So I grew up with such a big fear of failure. Like in high school, for example, if I didn't think I could succeed in something, I didn't try. Because my parents continuously remind me how much they sacrificed for me when they moved to Australia. I couldn't bring myself to tell them that I was going to leave it all and resign to start a fashion business that wasn't validated and proven yet. For 6 months, I would put on my suit every day, get up early, and then pretend to go to work. For someone to start a fashion label, you think they've got money, they've got connections. I didn't tick any of those boxes.
I can't wait to come back and ask you about Shark Tank, by the way. We're going to do that. We're going to do that a little bit later.
You're like, am I an extra or a main character? I'm about to find out.
Exactly.
You're not special. No one's going to believe in your little fashion business. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get 200 mil. I'm going to do it by 2020 and I'm going to ask you to leave.
I feel like I'm not allowed to say this, but I've kind of got to. We're going to be launching our International Women's Day. We're going to be doing a list of inspiring female entrepreneurs.
Oh, great.
So that's really exciting. And we thought, who could we do a podcast with who is a really exciting, inspiring female entrepreneur who's achieved some great things? And your name came to the top of that list. So really happy to talk to you today.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. That's very exciting.
I know you've done a number of these types of interviews. You've talked quite a lot about your journey, what it was that led you to founding the business, obviously starting in a corporate role and leaving that and setting up the company. What was the moment when you decided or you knew I'm an entrepreneur and this is for me going forward?
Well, I definitely never thought I could be an entrepreneur. We didn't have anyone that did that in our immediate family. And we immigrated to Australia when I was 8. So the only thing me and my family ever wanted was financial stability, which is kind of like the opposite of starting a business. So definitely never grew up with that feeling and idea or desire. I think part of it was like just, I guess, getting the idea of it getting romanticized the first time I heard about it. And then also just really, really actually hating my corporate job. So I worked in accounting, thought that I liked the idea. I think when I was younger, I romanticized the idea of wearing a suit in a high-rise building, working for a multinational, traveling for work. And that to me sounded so exciting, along with the financial security, until I realized I absolutely hated it. And it was just, slowly killing me one day at a time. I think the point I realized I hated corporate life before I realized I loved entrepreneurship. And it was this moment when I realized that I started to look at the 40 years, like a career in corporate, in accounting, instead of a life of financial stability. I started to look at it as 40 years of hard time in accounting prison. And I was like, can't do that. And I just thought, why work my butt off to be mediocre at something? I'm never going to be great at this. Let's just give something else a go. And so basically, at this point, a friend came to me with an idea to run pop-up stores to stock products from emerging designers. And I had no background in fashion at all. For someone to start a fashion label, you think they've got money, they've got connections, and they look and are a certain way. I didn't tick any of those boxes. But my philosophy on anything is like, if you don't have a better idea, then we'll just go with the one that's out there, That's why I tell my team sometimes, well, you don't have a better idea, so we're just going to do what I've suggested. But you're welcome to come at me with a better idea. Anyway, so that, I guess, your question is, when did I know? I think I never really recognized myself as an actual entrepreneur until I was able to make a living from it. That was probably the moment when I was like, okay, this is real.
Yeah, and there's no going back at that point.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things that holds people back from starting businesses, from some of the stuff I've read, this is particularly true of women, is perhaps the fear of taking the risk and what may happen if that risk is taken. Like what would you say to people in terms of perhaps some of the earlier struggles you faced, how you overcame them, and what would you advise people to think about in terms of that fear of failure and how to deal with it?
Yeah. I honestly still have a fear of failure. And I think so I grew up with such a big fear of failure. Like in high school, for example, if I didn't think I could succeed in something, I didn't try. I remember years before when I was at uni first year, I had this idea. Someone told me their mum lost weight from drinking oolong tea. And I'm like, wow, it was just like a Chinese tea. I'm like, we could definitely capitalize off that. Let's just go to the markets. We'll go to the markets and we'll sell it and we'll package it up. So there's like now a lot of brands that do that really well. This is way before that. We'll put it into like really nice boxes. We'll make it look like it's, we'll put in some Chinese medicine philosophy into it. And we'll go sell it, but we'll tell people that we're working for like a rich man and we're just his employees, because if we bump into anyone we know, we don't want them to know we've tried to start a business. Like that was 100% my way of thinking, because my main fear was that you don't want someone to find out in case you fail. When I first started Showpo, so many people actually told me, you have such a good job, why don't you stay in it? And like actually, ironically, it's those people, some of those people were the first to come to me for advice when everything was successful. And I think part of it, like, with hindsight, you can see that for those people, you're kind of doing what they're most afraid of doing and what they really want. And by you going there and just doing it and taking the risk, you're kind of validating that it can be done and putting a question mark on why they're not doing it. So that's definitely one part of it. And then, well, the other thing is as an immigrant child, and I'm sure other people as well, but I put this down to the fact that we are immigrants, because my parents continuously remind me how much they sacrificed for me when they moved to Australia. Everything that they had wanted was so that I can go work in this. You go into the right high school so that you can get the right mark, to get the right uni degree, to get the right job, to get that financial stability. And so when I had it, I couldn't bring myself to tell them that I was going to leave it all and resign to start a fashion business that wasn't validated and proven yet. And I was still living at home at this point. And I'm an only child, so all the spotlight is on me. So I didn't want them to, because I'm already questioning myself every day. I knew I will be questioning myself every day. Like, what the hell are you doing? So I didn't want them to be questioning me every day, and that will play into that fear of failure. So then I just didn't tell them. So for 6 months, I would put on my suit every day, get up early, and then pretend to go to work. And then my mom actually worked in the city at this point as well. So we would get the bus into the city together. That's all from having a fear of like my parents thinking I'm a failure.
And I often find that, I don't know, maybe it'd be interesting to see if you agree with this. As I've progressed in my career and been successful in certain areas, I think maybe there's this conception that the fear of failure disappears, but I actually find may even be the opposite, because the stakes seem to rise.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's right. The stakes keep getting yes.
So maybe it's a false kind of goal to think that if I keep getting better at what I do and keep building my experience, eventually I won't.
Yeah,
I'll no longer have a fear of failure.
It's like if you can retrain your brain to thinking it's a positive thing. One of the last time I had the biggest imposter syndrome was probably like doing Shark Tank, and I'm in the tank. And I'm like, okay, gonna try and sound smart. Don't say anything dumb. What are you going to ask next? And like, are the producers going to regret casting me? Like, they're like, she's a dud. She's not, and just being like, what am I doing here with all the other people, all the other judges? And then it's just like, you're like, okay, no, you're only thinking like this. You're only ever in that position when you're doing something really cool. You only do it when you're leveling up and you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone. So it's like a really good thing. So that's kind of like one way to think about it. Are you a Simpsons fan?
I was. I've probably not watched Simpsons for about 10 years.
Oh,
but I
no,
used to
only
watch
the
it a
first
lot.
10 seasons are. The OG seasons are good. Remember when Homer was an inventor? And then he was like big into Edison, and he realized he was really deflated that he could never be Edison. And then he goes into Edison's house, and then he realizes that Edison's idol was Leonardo da Vinci, and he's like, we all have someone that we're idolizing up to, and that's what I actually don't remember what the message was, but in my takeaway in my head, what I remember, we all have like, these bigger goals. It's only, like you said, it always gets bigger, and it keeps you moving forward, and you want to be constantly challenged like that.
Completely. I think that's so true, isn't it? It's learning to feel privileged that you get to be pushed outside your comfort zone. You get to try these new things. You get to have these new experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't wait to come back and ask you about Shark Tank. By the way, we're going to do that. We're going to do that a little bit later. Showpo is known for being fun and bold and social first. How would you describe your leadership style? Is it would it be those three words I've just said, and how has it evolved as the company's grown?
Yeah, I guess unlike most people, I've never had any form of management training, so I'm not the best manager, and I like to just build a great company that people that you're just not hiring dickheads in the first place, and you're hiring great people that help move the business along. I think for me, it's probably been more important to have seen what bad managers have been like, to know what I don't want to be like. And over the years, it always changes because, in the early days, you're like the same age as everyone, and your friends, you're spending weekends together, going on holidays together. And then all of a sudden I feel like COVID happened, kids happened, and now I'm like 10, 12 years older than most of the team. And I'm like, when did this happen? There's like a new line between like being the boss and the friend. And I guess also Showpo's become bigger, that they're like, oh, it's, you're not just, I don't know. It keeps evolving. And I think I always come back to like, be the boss that you want to have, or be the leader that you want to have.
Yeah. Yeah, the point about COVID is a good one. I feel something similar. I used to do a lot of traveling between the offices. I would know every person in the company by name. I'd have had beers with them, but then as COVID came, I had to completely change the way that I manage people, the way I communicate with people, the way I, working with people I've never met, making hires, hiring people you've never met, and then working with them for a number of years. It's a really different way of doing things.
It's like sometimes you've been working with someone for like a year and you're like, oh, it's nice to see your legs for the first time.
How has that affected the way you communicate within the company? Like, what are some lessons you'd give entrepreneurs on how to communicate inside a growing company like that in today's world?
Yeah, I think it's easy to get complacent and lose that transparency with the team, because I think we, before COVID, and we had everything like really set up with like regular like company updates, coffee catch-ups for starters, coffee catch-ups for people at different levels. And a lot of that like kind of just like fell by the wayside, because it felt like we had these organic, like really nice processes for the team to get to know each other when we were in the office, and just a lot of like natural organic things, because we had beer and rosé on tap. So it's just easy to have everyone sticking around on the Friday night. Yeah. And then it became these like awkward forced COVID initiatives, speaking to 50 heads on a Zoom call, and everyone's on mute. No one's laughing along like in person. And it's just, everything just got a bit, and I think it's easy for us, some of these nice things that you built to just kind of fall by the wayside. So once we brought those back, we found that it's just been so much more engaging for the team.
Yeah. So like you say, when it's a small company and perhaps everyone's in one site, it's reasonably easy to like encode a culture. How do you do that across a bigger organization?
COVID, one of the great things is it's helped us work with more agencies, freelancers, offshore team. It's like really made us be more global with like our workforce and have more also like more flexibility for parents or people who have special circumstances. So that's been great. Honestly, like I think this might be hard for everyone. Like we just have a great HR team who just they do regular check-ins and we have a lot of like cultural initiatives. It's easy to not do things, right? Because you kind of don't feel like there's value from each time you do these certain things. But once it becomes a cadence of every fortnight, we have like weekly team meet where we, all gather around and company update, team update, and then the other alternate fortnight, we have Showpo happy hour, cheese boards, get to know the new people, have some drinks. It's easy to be like, let's skip it, we're busy this week. But if you just keep those things being in place, just keeps everyone like very united or just like, I don't know, it's a good way for people to get to know each other.
Either within e-commerce or just generally within business, obviously the exposure you've had to the sharks, is there a particular trend that you think people need to be talking about right now?
I think it's a lot of it is like, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily new, but like real, organic, raw, authentic storytelling in content. I think there's just the people that are doing it well are just like flying. You can see any traditional businesses that manage to crack the code actually kill it. And any new businesses that do it, they can just, have exponential growth. And I think another one is probably like the growth of like the creator economy, which is kind of like associated with that, with like things like TikTok Shop, like the power of like a small creator, the power of one person can have on storytelling is huge. Like almost like everyone can have a voice. So that is really quite exciting.
Isn't that one of the amazing things about social media? I guess both of those things you mentioned there is if you can get your storytelling right.
Yeah. I think it's exciting that anyone can do it because I think, 8 years ago, you kind of like, you needed to be, it is a cliche, but it's based on some truth, like, a bikini body, hot girl, like to get that following. Of course, there are many exceptions to the rule, but now I think we're in this day and age where anyone can do it. Actually, if you can just show where you're unique and where you're different, and you can niche down in any market, and if you do it well, you can have this amazing global reach.
What's a leadership lesson you wished you would have learned earlier or been taught earlier?
That's the thing. I definitely have made mistakes. I have making mistakes on the job, and that's hard because you're making mistakes. It does impact someone's career and like where they're working, and when you're just starting and you don't have a HR person to ask for help, you don't even have entrepreneur friends to ask for help. You are kind of learning on the job. Like sometimes I wish I could because it'd be weird to do it, but sometimes I do wish I can reach out to people that like I, would have fired or like had a bad working relationship in those early days and not necessarily managed it well, and be like, sorry, like I'm definitely not that person now. I've learned my lesson, but I've had to, at the time you're kind of doing what you think is best. Like nothing bad, nothing too bad. I just think, now like I've just learned so much more throughout the years, and so much of it you learn on the job. I'm non-confrontational. So in those early days, if someone annoyed me, instead of pulling them into a meeting and having like a conversation and giving that feedback, because my biggest thing now is like, if we were to have a performance meeting, you'll never be blindsided. You already have that feedback because feedback is a gift and it works both ways. I want feedback from people too, and I'm an open door, but I know how to communicate feedback better now. I think well or better. But I think in those early days, I think I would be, I don't know, you just kind of beat around the bush, and then you just like, it just builds up this tension, and I just was avoiding confrontation too much. Yeah. And I think as a leader, you have to have the balls to have those conversations.
Completely. And often doesn't it feel like it feels easier or nicer not to give them the feedback? In the short term, you feel like you're doing the nice thing for them, but actually in the long run, you're not. Because like you say, if you'd have given them that feedback, maybe they could have corrected, and then, we wouldn't be in the position later on. But it's super hard.
One of the best ones was I was finally work myself up. I'm like, I'm gonna give her feedback. And I wrote and I was gonna sandwich the shit sandwich, right?
The
I
shit
wrote
sandwich,
the compliments, I wrote the feedback, but right. I went in there, she's like, you know what? I resigned. I'm like, it's the best day of my life.
Picked up a while ago. I used to try and predict or plan how, especially conversations like that, I used to try and sort of strategize. If the person says this, I'll say this. And I just learned that that's just pointless because there's no way you can predict how people are going to
Yeah, exactly.
respond or react, or you just got
Yeah,
to roll with it.
exactly.
My research here says this, correct me if I'm wrong. The research said, you've said that in investing in women is how we change the world.
Yes.
Good, so that's true. What does that mean to you, and how have you seen that play out sort of either in your business or around you generally?
If Showpo is like a company that's completely driven, it's driven by women. And I think we've always had female leaders on top, which is just, I guess, something that I haven't been used to in the corporate world. Where I used to work corporate, there was not only was there a glass ceiling, there was a bamboo ceiling. So, it looked very ominous, the path forward. That and the fact that I was bad at my job, I was like, that's part of why I'm like, this isn't going to go well. There's just so many stats with like having women at the top, like the impact on that for a business. And I can see it, I guess, in real life in my business. So I definitely think that investing with women has such a big impact, not only in businesses, but I think like in society as well.
You've grown Showpo without external funding, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you? That's another area that gets discussed a lot in terms of sort of female entrepreneurs, is perhaps a lack of access to funding, or certainly funding going towards them.
I don't know what the statistic. It's something like less than 1% or 3%
It's
of
crazy.
funds.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's a ridiculous.
It's hard to
statistic.
believe. I mean, I've been very lucky in that, like, I haven't ever had to look for funding. But speaking to other female entrepreneurs, like, it definitely seems like it will be such a difficult thing. The thing is, the consumers who actually will buy things based on like something they see on an influencer or an ad, that's mainly women, right? Like, I'm just speaking about the people that I know follow more recommendations from friends, right? Women are the people that will buy, and it's female product businesses that we've seen skyrocket in recent years from e-commerce. Anyway, my point is, but it's almost like up to someone to be able to articulate that. So if you didn't go to like Wharton or Harvard Business School, like I would imagine like, or the equivalent in Australia, I would imagine it would be so hard. So my experience has been, I guess, kind of in that space. We were looking for a CTO, so a chief technology officer, and we were at the point where doing like a few $1 million a year, but there was huge growth. So, but it wasn't necessarily a serious business just yet. We went to a recruiter to look for a CTO, and he basically said that I don't think you'll be able to find a CTO unless you make him a co-founder, which essentially he was saying like no one's going to believe in your little fashion business because, you're just selling clothes unless you give him equity. You're not going to get someone good to take you seriously unless you give away equity. He said you're not going to get your 100 mil without getting a tech co-founder. That's what he said. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get 200 mil. I'm going to do it by 2020, and I'm going to ask you to leave. And annoyingly, we were on track to doing it, and then COVID hit. But then we got there just after. Anyway.
Nice. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Knowing kind of what you know now and the experience you've had, would you have gone for external funding?
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, I have definitely always said no to external funding until when COVID. I keep referring to COVID because those are the tough years. I wouldn't change what's happened, but and I definitely, if I was to start another business, I definitely wouldn't do it. But I can definitely see the merits in it.
I was just thinking if you'd been put off from going for external funding because of the climate, but it was just a business decision that this
Yeah,
wasn't right
well,
in those
it was
areas.
actually more a personal, because I worked in corporate finance. So basically doing due diligence for other companies looking to buy and acquire businesses. And I literally worked so hard on the business to get away from that space. So to spend another year preparing my own due diligence doc for Showpo to go on the roadshow to pitch to investors, I was like, oh my God, no way. That's literally the one thing I'm getting away from. So I was like, I would rather just go and make the money than get the investors' money. And then I have a boss again. And I think with more maturity, I think this thing that has changed when COVID was tough. And as business gets bigger and there's more, you're risking more and you're kind of playing with bigger amounts of money. I do see having the investor help is something that I value more. So I think that having like a great mentor is something that would be of value over just like the capital injection in those early days.
Referring back to COVID, I don't know if you feel the same. I feel like since then time just goes by so quickly for whatever reason. I was looking back into our archives and I saw we had a picture of you actually at our International Women's Day event in 2020.
Wow.
I think it was.
Oh, just before COVID.
Yeah.
Did I look a lot less, so much younger and less stressed? It's like that's pre-COVID years.
But that was only 3 or 4 years ago, and I imagine how much has changed since then.
It's been an incredible journey. We're going into our 15th year this year.
I feel like I'm not allowed to say this, but I've kind of got to. The like-minded bitches drinking wine.
Yes.
So that's grown quickly. I understand it's growing globally as well. You've got people around the world.
That's right.
Getting involved.
It's basically a business group mainly on Facebook. I think we've got over 180,000 members now, but we've done events in 25 cities all over the world, in the States, in Europe, in Asia. Actually, on International Women's Day, we're doing a conference and it's called BitchCon. And we're getting amazing speakers to come, and then all the profits from the ticket sales are going to charity. It's going to the Hunger Project, which again is it's an amazing business that really focuses on using women as the solution to fight poverty and global world hunger, supporting women to, really make an impact. That's what they do. So they basically give microfinance loans to women in third world countries. And then there's just these amazing stories on women who have just given this one little chance, this one little loan. There's a woman who her and her family were only having one meal a day. And then they were able to get this little loan to grow maize. And then they were able to feed themselves 3 days a week. And then they started planting more and selling at the market. Then with that, she reinvested and she bought a sewing machine. Now she's making clothes, selling that at the market. At the time I heard this story, she was saving up to buy a motorcycle. So then she can go to other cities, like the nearby neighborhoods, And then there's been stories about women who are so proud to show off what they've been able to achieve. And not only are they able to support their community, they have surplus food for the communities around them. It all comes from the women in these communities, from being able to have this chance, which I just really resonate with so much. I think about if I wasn't able to move to Australia, what the opportunities I would have had. If I grew up in the rural China versus city China, the opportunities, it's not everyone gets given a fair chance in life, but everyone can still have that extra help. Really exciting charity.
So cool. It's so funny you mentioned that. So around probably the same time this will be released, we're also going to be releasing a podcast with a guy called Professor Muhammad Yunus. And he won the Nobel Prize. He was one of the first to do exactly what you're saying. He was doing microloans in Bangladesh in the 1980s.
Wow.
Maybe even earlier. And it was just exactly the stuff you're talking about. Incredible. And one thing he said on that podcast, which was really interesting, he said he thought that credit should be a human right,
Mm. Yeah, I like
which is
that.
interesting.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. He thinks basically everyone is an entrepreneur inside, and sometimes they don't have the tools. And the number one tool, I guess, is credit quite a lot of the time. If you can't afford to buy the material, then how are you going to make
Yeah. Well, that's the only
make the
reason
change?
actually I was able to start my business is because I did have credit cards from when I worked corporate, and they
Yeah.
were absolutely maxed out. Otherwise, there would have been no way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Again, on the mentorship side, obviously you do your podcast.
Oh, yes. Well, we're in that studio right now. There's the
There you are.
signage to
Very
prove
nice.
it.
What kind of impact are you hoping to have through the podcast, through mentorship?
Well, I'm actually getting a little bit mentored by the businesses I interview, which I really love. It's like networking on speed, like just like every week you can I get to like pick who I want to speak to, reach out to like someone I look up to, and then I get to share it with anyone else who wants to listen. Like it's an incredible concept. And yeah, so love that. And then I think with basically, on Shark Tank, not only are you kind of question whether this is a good business because, you want to know if you want to make an investment in the business, but you also give advice to the businesses, but they're generally quite defensive. Sorry, they're not defensive, but they're not in a position to really take it on because, first of all, there's cameras pointed at you, which is probably the first time that's happened. There's 5 different people firing questions at you. So it's not a place to really give that much advice. And you also want to be able to like defend against those things. You want to back your business, right? But I kind of really love that part of it. So I think like bringing it into like our own little format. We started doing it on the podcast, doing it on TikTok.
Is there one piece of advice you'd give to, particularly thinking about women out there who are thinking about starting a business? Is there a particular message you would give to them to encourage them to do so?
I guess, I mean, look, people will be not doing it for all different reasons, but I would just tell them like to back yourself. Actually, like think about the cost of not doing it. For me personally, like at the time, I was younger. I would have over dramatized every situation. Because all of a sudden, at one point when my business failed, I was unemployed. I was in debt. I couldn't get another job because it was in the middle of the global financial crisis. And now I'm a failure because my business failed. And I was still pretending to go to work and I didn't know how to tell my parents. So you're like, that was the worst thing that happened at that point. And I, luckily got out of it. But even if I didn't start a successful business, like I would have just found another job eventually. That's like the worst case scenario, right? Like the worst case scenario for me right now versus what I have is that I would be stuck in a job that I hated. And that for me is so much worse. So you have one life. You don't want to always be wondering. I think you also have to believe in yourself that you can succeed. And it's not a straight path. Like it could lead you into other things. Like my failed business led me into this business. Life is not predictable. You have to just like take yourself out of your comfort zone, take yourself out of the usual and open yourself up to change and pivot and learn. And, things will, if you work your butt off, it will work out, not necessarily in the way that you want it necessarily, but I think there's always more. And I like to use this analogy of like golf. It's not about hitting a goal in one. And if you miss, you're like, all right, I'm out. See ya. If you miss, you go closer. Because you're at least closer. You pivot, you readjust your strategy, and then the most important thing is to have another swing. And each time you get closer and you get better.
Completely. Are you a golfer?
No, I just couldn't think of a better analogy.
I was going to say, when you say every time you get closer, that's not always my experience of golf. Sometimes I end up
every time you play
after the shot.
putt-putt. I don't know.
There you go. Shark Tank.
Yes.
Yeah. So after being on Shark Tank, has your perspective on investing changed at all?
Look, even like if it gets renewed one more year, I think I'm going to have a big pivot in my strategy because I kind of
Interesting.
generally want a bunch of, I think initially I wanted like a lot of little small businesses where I can really make an impact. Like if I work hard with them, we can like 2x, 3x growth in a few months. Like we can do a lot. I think now, just with like how much time that takes, how difficult it is to run my business and have two kids and a social life. Like, no, I think I want to move. I probably want to also then diversify into later stage, not still later stage, but later stage for Shark Tank,
Yeah.
relative to Shark Tank. I also want to take it as an opportunity to actually learn about new industries. I think I've been previously, I kind of default into what I know. But I think now that, especially even doing the Help My Small Businesses, speaking to a lot more businesses across other industries through the podcast, I feel like it's a lot of the same principles. So I'm actually excited to use that as an opportunity to kind of expand my horizon and
Yeah.
diversify, a little bit.
So is that your vision to sort of move into being an investor and having a portfolio of companies that you're involved in? Is that the goal?
I mean, I want to. My husband will say no because he's like, you've got so much. He's like, I'm going to have half the work is going to fall back on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. He works as our chief financial officer and general manager, but he's also currently the chief technology officer as well. He does all the boring parts of the business, essentially. Sorry, anyone who works. He calls my, so we even like marketing, he'll look after digital marketing, and he says you look after the coloring in department. Which
Interesting.
again, please, anyone who works, do not be insulted. We're just joking. We respect everyone.
How long have you worked together for?
Probably 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it works really well because his love language is quality time and mine is acts of service. So he works for me for free and then he gets to hang out with me sometimes at work.
Perfect.
He just gets more quality time. So
Interesting. Going back to Shark Tank, I don't know if you've played this out in your head before. How would it have gone if you'd have pitched Showpo back in the day?
oh, actually, it's funny. So Robert Herjavec, he is on both Canadian, American, Australian Shark Tank, and he's honestly one of the highlights of being this whole experience. Like I get, and I've sat next to him both years. I'm like, I get a front row seat to Robert Herjavec, and he's just so nice and so entertaining. And one of the things that says is the biggest difference from the Australian and American Shark Tanks are that in America, like there's a more like sell yourself culture. Like it's not, if you're selling yourself, if you're like going, this is me, this is what I do, it's very accepted. It's very normal and it's very encouraged. If he goes, this is the worst pitch ever, people will be like, what? No, I've got that. People will defend themselves. In Australia, he's like, everyone's like, yeah, you're probably right. Oh, yeah. Like they were just very chilled. It's very laid back. And I think that's what I would be like if someone was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, what's so special about selling clothes on the internet? And I'll be like, you're probably right. Like, I feel like it's just, I'm not saying like Americans a certain way. I'm just saying that's just, Australians are just very chill.
My experience of America is very similar. They love a good sales picture.
Yeah.
They enjoy advertising. I mean, you just have to watch the Super Bowl. Like people look forward to the to the advertising. It's
Yeah. I love
yeah,
it. Oh my God.
yeah. As a shark, what do you think is the biggest reddest flag in a pitch? What's something that could put you off very quickly?
Yeah. Definitely like not knowing your numbers. If you don't know your numbers for a pitch, if you're not prepared for a pitch, when you're asking for money, how bad are
Yeah,
you going to be once you have the money? If you're not prepared when you've got going on TV asking for money, then this is the best you're going to get. So that's definitely a red flag. And I think another red flag is ego. Like I just would not want to could not imagine working with someone with ego. So any signs of that, I'm out.
yeah. What do you see as a sign of that ego that you've mentioned there? What are some things that people can look out for?
Well, especially when you're interviewing, I think like blaming the situation, not taking accountability. I think also sometimes people might work for a successful company and attribute too much of that success to their input. I like to always like ask in interviews, like when we ask for a reference, what would your manager tell you that you need to work on? And I also, and just remember, self-awareness is one of the most important skills of all. So then they're not just trying to be like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm like, really? You think like when we call your manager, they're going to say you're a perfectionist and you don't like letting go. And that's like the one thing that you need to work on. And I make it sound like I'm really going to judge them, like assess them based on like how well they get that right.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone can use that. I think it's a good one.
That's a good one. We're going to finish with a quick fire round. I know you enjoy these. I've seen you do a few of these.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind, what's the best business advice you've ever received?
You're not special. But I can't make it quick. I have to explain it quickly. It's from my husband, and this is back many years ago. He's like, whenever I'm like too scared to do something, public speaking or like take a risk in this. It started with like wanting to get my manual driver's license, and I'm like, oh, I can't do it. Blah blah blah. He's like, well, most people in Europe can drive manual. Sorry, stick shift. Is that what you call? So what, you think you're so special that you can't do it? Like what makes you so special? So that's kind of like just do it, you know? Like don't have an excuse.
Yeah. A book or a podcast that's had a big impact on you?
How Will You Measure Your Life? Clayton M. Christensen. Do you have anything?
You were very emphatic with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've only read 5 books in my life. I also like the Lean Startup. That's another one. But it's basically, it's like, you know, it's just quickly, it's not really rapid fire, but I'm going to sell it to everyone that's listening. I think it's the guy who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, but this is his less famous book. But he alludes to situations in business and in personal life, because basically he went to his Harvard 5-year reunion. Everyone's doing really well. He goes to, everyone's getting great jobs. Goes to his 10-year reunion. Everyone's getting married. Some people are having kids. People are like at the top of their game in the corporate world. Goes to 20 years, people are estranged from their kids, divorced from their wives, and they are also some of the guys from Enron. So, you know, really just, he's like, I know that no one that works this hard that I went and had the same kind of education with, no one sets out to be like not successful and in all these areas of life. And he kind of does almost like, he does this kind of uses his Harvard brains to kind of like do a study on like what are the reasons that led to that. And then he not only does he talk about it, he'll have like an example where he's comparing the business world and the, you know, family and kids, and it's only like 150 pages so for someone who doesn't like reading, it's great.
Perfect.
Yes, I've not taken, there's no affiliate link. I'm not working for the book.
One business tool or app that you couldn't live without?
Yeah, ChatGPT.
Yeah, completely. Can you imagine that didn't exist?
I know.
Like a year ago.
I even like for my kids, and my 4-year-old's like, why are some things sweet and some things sour? I'm like, God, you can explain. And they have like a 10-minute conversation while I'm just like, you know, like it's great.
It's so patient and understanding. Like,
so patient and understanding, and especially sometimes you just like, yeah, that's right. It's going to give everyone false hopes of like how we should be behaving.
Yeah, exactly. If you weren't running Showpo, what would you be doing?
Either like selling like one thing, maybe like kids' clothes, for example, or maybe like almost have like a startup studio. So like a bunch of businesses running and like kind of like maybe an incubator. I don't know.
Serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or I'll just like be a travel influencer. We'll see. I don't know.
On that, actually, what's a final quick fire? Something on your bucket list?
Oh, okay. God. On my bucket list is probably just going back to like somewhere I've already been, like comfortably in Europe, just going to Paris, having a nice restaurant, no kids, like that would just be nice. I've already done that many times, but I feel like that's what I just want to revisit, something fun from like the olden days.
Have you spent much time in China? Is that like a part of your heritage that you
Yeah, I mean,
embrace?
I've been quite a few times, and I've been quite a few times like with family, with friends, and China is like a lot of fun. Just to even as a travel destination. But my grandparents kind of died a few years ago, so I don't have like more of a reason to go, and I don't really need to. It's crazy. I haven't even like really need to go there for work. You can do so much. Just it's at the start I didn't never travel because I didn't have the money, and then by the time you could, all the systems are set up that you don't even need to. But yeah, actually, I should have something more exciting on my bucket list. Maybe India. I feel like I should go to India. I'm waiting for a friend to get married. I'm like, I'm not going to go before then. So yeah, something more exciting.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the time today. Really, really enjoyed getting to know you, and thank you for being so open and authentic.
I've
Is
got
there anything
verbal diarrhea, just word vomit a lot.
So it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to speak with you. If people didn't know you, but now they do, where should they follow you? How can they stay in touch?
Oh, great. You can follow me. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as The Lazy CEO. And also my business is Showpo, SHOWPO. Oh, and the podcast, The Lazy CEO podcast. Forgot about the podcast.
Of course, the podcast.
That's right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
It's been an
much.
absolute pleasure, and wishing you a great day.
You too.